Hi, welcome back to Heather's Crochet Corner. In this video, it's gonna be more of a show and tell. There won't be much actual crocheting happening. I'm just trying to get back in touch with how I felt as an absolute beginner to crochet. I felt a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of abbreviations and shorthand being used, and a lot of it just didn't make sense. And I didn't really have anybody to explain any of that. So this is kind of what I'm trying to do to help all of you out there who are absolutely new, who want to get into crocheting, who might also feel a bit overwhelmed. So it's going to be more of a show and tell, basically. I'm not going to go too much into depth. I'm going to just sort of give you a quick summary of things and try to point out any tips and things that just happen spontaneously along the way. So let's get started here. My first little picture here, just meant to be kind of funny, but in all seriousness though, there are several types of skeins of yarn or balls of yarn, however you want to say it, in its truest form when it's being spun by people who spin yarn. It turns out to be looking like this. Is called a hank. In this style here, you might have seen it at different vendor marketplaces or like artisan shows. You won't usually find this style in your typical retailer. This is like very specialty. But it comes this way from them directly, and it's all like continuous, and it's honestly a bit difficult to work with if you've never worked with it. I had no idea how this was when I first got one for myself. Not easy to work with, but it's meant to be wound into a ball. I didn't have the ability, nor did I know how to do it, so I just didn't end up using this at all when I got it, which is unfortunate. But this can also be shown as like a folded hank. So kind of like, think of it if you're like, wrapping up like an extension cord or something, and you just sort of put a band around it. That's kind of what that demonstrates here. There's also a twisted hank, which is basically this, just fancier and all twisted. Again, these are meant, like these here are meant to be wound up as in a ball. Not that you can't use them as they are. I'm sure some people do. But you'll see these from people who either dye them, like dye the yarn, or spin the yarn, or do both. So you'll see those being offered. The typical, very popular, the pull skein. You'll see these everywhere. I'm sure you've seen it. You've seen it on my videos for sure. I've got one here. I'll show this again. So it's meant to be either pulled from the center, or I'm sure this one here is probably the strand here to pull it if you're an outside puller. Those are very popular. That's how most yarn comes these days. The bullet is basically, once you've undone the wrapper and you've worked with the yarn, you're pretty much left with something like this. So I'm an outside puller, so when I'm done, here's my long tail. I pretty much just wrap it around. Good to go. That's good enough for me. The ball of yarn, you've probably seen these. I'm sure maybe your grandmother might have done this, your mom, your aunt. Most people will actually take a perfectly nice and usable, pull skein, and they will unwind it and make it into a ball for themselves. More power to you. I honestly don't see the point, but personal preference. There's no right or wrong. If that's how you like your yarn, by all means do it that way. I know there's these fancy yarn bowls out there that make it easy for you, and the yarn doesn't like bounce around while you're pulling on it. It just stays in this nice little ball, this nice little bowl, and just spins nice and freely. That's fine. They come in cake styles. I've got one here to show you. This is Yarn Inspirations Karen Cakes. It looks like this. So it's also a center pull or an outside pull, but at least this way you get to choose how you want to start your project, whether you want to start it with this color in the center and work your way out, or you can start from the outside color and work your project in. So that's something you probably will see in the retailers as well, because those are popular. The donut ball and the hardcore ball and the cone are typically something you're going to see the smaller weight yarns, like the lacy, the zeros, the ones, the 2 weights, usually come in the style here. These I have seen at Walmart locally. You'll see them at Michael's or your other, you know, craft store like that, probably Joann's if you're in the US. So just to show you guys how yarn comes, what's more popular, what you're likely to see, just so there's no confusion there. So there's that. I'll go on to my next one. Let's see. All right, here's the next one. Here's one big question I get a lot from new crocheters is, well, how much do I need? How much yarn do I need? Well, that's $1 million question now, isn't it? This little chart here is great. It gives you an idea as to how much you need to start. You're going to have to follow your pattern. If you're following a pattern, it'll tell you exactly how much you need, or it should. Any decent pattern will tell you how many skeins of yarn or balls of yarn you need. So if you've got a pattern and it doesn't give you the information, I don't know that I'd bother with it. Your choice. But again, it tells you if you're using a super fine weight, number 1, or number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever weight yarn you're using. Again, I've already done a video about this. You check your yarn label. Here it is here, number 4. So this is a medium weight. So if I wanted to make a hat here using a 4 weight, it says I need about 200 to 225 yards. If I wanted to make a scarf, same weight, 375 to 500, and so on. Like socks gives you an idea. I don't know if that's for one sock or for the pair. That's not really, I'd imagine the pair, I hope. Shawls, adult sweaters, baby blankets, which doesn't really give you the sizing, but that's usually about anywhere from 24 inches by 24 inches to about 36 by 36. You're going to get various measurements based on where you look, but really no one's going to be, you know, measuring the blanket saying, oh, it's too small, oh, it's too big. So just stick with either like a 24 inch by 24 inch, or if you want to make it a bit bigger as the child grows, do 36 by 36. Afghans, so quite a bit more. And where again do you find this information? The yardage, that's also on your yarn label. This one here, where is the information? Oh, teeny tiny. Tells you here, it gives you the ounces, it's 8.8 or 250 grams. It's also 417 yards or 381 meters. So whichever metric you prefer to use, or what it tells you here. So this is going by yards. I've got 417 yards. This yarn here would be enough to do probably a small shawl or anything above it without having to get a second one. So that's how you know how much you need. You can find this online if you just type in how much yarn do I need. You usually see a chart that looks just like this. You can just print it off, keep it on hand. That's what I do, because sometimes you just need something to look up, have it on hand. My next little thing here is, okay, well, now that we know how much yarn you need, what size hook do you need? Well, it all depends. I'll just use this one here. This is just a little cotton yarn. This one says it's a 4 weight. It tells you, it recommends a 5mm hook. or if you're going by the US terms, it's an H8. So that's where you should start. And your crochet hooks, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this. This one happens to have both. It does say H8 right here, and it says 5mm right in here. But what you need to know, if it hasn't already been mentioned, is that there are US sizes and metric sizes. And so the US likes to use an alphanumeric. They usually have a letter and a number assigned to their hooks. And then the UK, is that right? I would think so, because I mean it's European, they typically go metric. But anyway, there's a metric in millimeters, and what they're talking about is the shaft. This section here where it gets at its widest point to where it starts at the little thumb depression, that is the size. This, if you took a pair of like measuring calipers, you could actually measure this and it would be 5mm. So the alphanumeric H8 for me means absolutely nothing. It doesn't tell me what size it is. It just gives me a letter and a number. So my brain knows 5mm. That makes sense to me. But if you want to go alphanumeric, if that makes sense to you, use that. My only issue with using alphanumeric is that you're going to see a little like some duplicates. And it's like, well, if it's an exact size, why would there be duplicates? So it's like, for here, a size 4mm, they're calling it a G6. So is a 4¼ it's just a G. Well, not all hooks have the right sizing on them. Some have nothing, some just have the alphanumeric, some just have the metric. And then let's see, oh, well, there's 3 sizes here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. There's 3 sizes here that are listed as Q, from 15mm, 15.75 or 15¾ and 16. So which size are you actually using? It's going to make a difference in the pattern and your tension. And it's like, if your hooks all just say Q, how do you know what size you're using? So that's why I get a little perturbed and a little annoyed with the alphanumeric. But if it works for you, it makes sense for you, have at it. I will always mention the metric because you can't mess that up. There's no way to mess up the metric. Anyway, that's that. That's something you guys need to know, is that there are US sizings and UK or metric sizings for hooks. Here's something else we kind of discussed in a previous video, as far as like when you're doing a single crochet, your single crochet stitch is 1 chain high. So if you're not following a pattern and you're sort of just, you know, freehanding a project, it's just rule of thumb. Again, it's not a right or wrong. If you want to chain to make your chains higher and then single crochet going back, you go ahead and do that. If it's not mentioned, it's usually just sort of implied that you're chaining 1 and going back with a single crochet. And I'm also introducing you guys to the abbreviations. So when you see SC in a pattern, it usually stands for single crochet. And so your half double is a half size up from your single. So you're gonna need 2 chains typically, unless your pattern states otherwise. 2 chains to turn and go back the other way. Your double crochet is 3 chains high, so you need 3 chains to turn and go back the other way. Again, here's your abbreviations for half double crochet, your abbreviations for double crochet. This says treble. It's also known as triple. So there's UK terms as well, not just in crochet hooks, but in terminology, and that's really important to know, because if you get a pattern and you're not aware that it has UK terms and that their terms are different. Like their stitches, while they are made the same way, they have a different name to them. But if you're thinking, I don't know, we'll get to it, it'll come up. I won't confuse you now, we'll keep going with this. So a triple, I know it says treble, a triple is 4 chains high. So if it's not mentioned, it's usually implied that you're going 4 chains and going back the other way. There is a double treble, double triple, either way, it's making a stitch that's 5 chains high before you go back the other way. So again, if it's not implied, that's basically the rule of thumb. There is no real rules in crochet, so if you need to chain more than the, implied, you go ahead and do that. But just so you guys know. Now I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this. Probably not really well, but this is basically what my introduction to crochet looked like. This was probably early 2000s. I had my first really and only one lesson at Michael's, and it was just basically learning how to chain, and it may have, she may have covered how to turn the work and go back, but when I got home I was so excited, I think I just kept chaining and chaining and chaining, and I'm like, it's not really getting any taller, it's just getting a lot longer. So I had no idea about how to turn my work, how to make, how to grow it taller. And I'm like, well, I'll get a book. I'll get a How to Crochet for Beginners book. And I got all these cool, nifty, visuals. But as a visual learner, it's like, you think they'd be helpful. I mean, they tell you what to do, but they give you all these abbreviations, which I don't know what they mean. I'd have to go back to the beginning of the book to find out what these, little, what is SC? It says, SC, insert hook into STYO, pull through STYO, pull through both LPS on hook. What the heck is that? I have no idea. So I know I have to decipher all of this on previous pages and try to make sense of it. And for me, looking at these visual aids, while it may be helpful to some people, I'm like, I have no idea what they're showing me. I don't know where they are. I don't know how they got to this point. So that's why I show you guys in a way that makes sense to me as a beginner. That's how I would have wanted to learn. So for that reason, I kind of just stopped crocheting. I didn't know how to turn my work. I couldn't make sense of the basics. I couldn't make sense of these visuals. So for me, it was a little defeating. So I'm hoping that's not the case with you guys. I hope you guys continue. So we'll move on to the next thing. So not only do you get those visuals, but you get a lot of abbreviations. And again, you get US terms, you get UK terms. So you will see SS and you'll see a little symbol, because not only do you get an actual worded, printed pattern, but you can also get little pictures, which once you understand what everything means, it all makes sense. And basically this is this. So yeah, if you've watched my last video, you'll understand a bit more of what's going on there. So we'll go back to pattern reading, back to making sense of all the abbreviations. US term and UK term is a slip stitch, SS slip stitch. So that's the same. And CH, chain, that's the same. Here's where it starts to change. And for me, I'm going to always use US terminology, and I won't, I'll let you know what the equivalent is if I remember, but for now it's important that you guys know it exists, because it can be confusing, and I'll show you that too. So SC, that's your single crochet, and it's shown as a plus sign. But in UK terms, they're calling it a double crochet, which doesn't make any sense to me because there's nothing double about it. Not to knock the UK, I'm just expressing my frustration. It's like, you know, it's an art form. Why isn't there a universal language for this? Why make it difficult? Anyway, half double crochet, they call it a half treble. And it looks like a letter T. And you have a double crochet for US, they call it a treble in the UK. So it looks like again, it's just the T, and it's got a little slash going through it for a double. And then you have your triple, which they call a double treble. So again, these are your abbreviations. And then the instructions in between kind of just gives you a worded instruction. So if you're able to follow it, you know, if you're like my husband and you can read and retain and it makes sense, this will probably work really well for you. So there is that. And let's see what's next. So yes, not only do you find patterns that look like this, these are like little diagrams, but again, if you've made a granny square, this will probably make sense to you. If you haven't done a granny square at all, if this is the first time you're seeing this, this may not make any sense to you. I'll do my best to kind of walk you through it quickly. Your starting point for this granny square is right at this little dot here. And what it's saying is that you're making 4 stitches. So in this case, you're making 4 chains, which if you looked at my video from earlier today, that's what we started to do for that granny square, is we made 4 chains. So your slip knot, 4 chains, and once you get to your 4th chain, you're kind of slip stitching it into itself. That's what makes the center of the granny square. Then you're chaining 3, because your granny square is made with a double crochet stitch, and your double crochet stitch is 3 chains high. So that's what we're doing. And here's your chain symbol again. So you're doing 3 chains, and then you start making your cluster, your granny stitch square. So you've already done your 3 chains, which counts as your first double crochet. Double crochet, here's the symbol for that. So once you've done your chains, your next step is to make 2 double crochet stitches to complete your first cluster. And then you make 2 chains to space. You do 3 more double crochets into that same stitch, because you can see how these stitches are kind of like coming out because you're working through the center. You're working through here. Here's your 3 double crochets. Okay, and you just follow along each round. So when we do these in my live event, probably in not the next class, because that's technically this weekend, we're doing a double crochet and a headband. The next one will probably be the granny square, so I will have this as a visual, but we'll move along. So this was actually my first pattern that I actually attempted myself. I had been freehanding or following along with YouTube videos to make certain things, but once I saw the abbreviations for long enough and I understood, because a lot of the YouTubers would, you know, sort of have like comments on the side about, okay, here's your first row, here's what you need to do, here's your second row, and sort of wrote it out while they were doing it. I was able to retain what I was seeing and reading. So this was my first actual pattern. This was actually from a customer who bought a kit and they could not make sense of the pattern. And I can't say that I blame them, because if you look at that, it's a little overwhelming. And not only that, it's in UK terms, which I didn't realize, because it never occurred to me that would be something I'd see here in Canada. But again, I don't know where they purchased this from. It could have been online somewhere, or they could have actually gone to the UK, picked it up, I don't know. But anyway, once I started working this, and realizing something's not quite right, I realized, oh, you know, they have UK terms listed first, which it's like, why would they do that unless it mattered? So yeah, so it's a lot of, again, trying to decipher what they actually mean versus what I'm actually doing. So I had to make notes. Anytime I saw DC, I assume my brain goes double crochet. No, no, not the UK, it's single crochet. So yeah, there's a lot of that I had to sort of interpret and figure out for myself while doing this. So again, those exist. Put that off to the side. So I have mentioned this in a previous video. If you're going to get yourself a pattern to start, if you are comfortable making your chains, you're comfortable with making a single crochet stitch, you have your tension all worked out, then yeah, absolutely go get yourself a pattern. There's loads of free patterns all over the internet. I do highly recommend you go through a yarn manufacturer like Yarn Inspirations, or you can go through, you know, Red Heart or Lion Brand or whoever, Bernat. Go to their sites and get, you know, look through their free crochet patterns for beginners or easy level, because it's going to be so much easier for you. You won't have to deal with like UK terms. You won't have to deal with people who have, you know, created their own patterns but haven't really done so in a proper fashion. They don't always give you the right information. They usually leave a lot of information out, and it's for something because they know they do it. They just assume that everybody's going to know how to do it or what to do. Anyway, digressing, getting back into this. So yes, get yourself a good pattern from a reputable source, because it's got loads of information. It tells you it's a crochet pattern versus a knitting. It tells you it's an easy skill level, which is great for beginners. It tells you, let's see, gives you your gauge, which we've talked about in a previous video very recently. So you can look up that video and understand what I'm talking about here with gauge. In this particular project, you're just making a reusable Swiffer pad for your Swiffer sweeper. So that's pretty cool. And in this case, they're highlighting the Lily Sugar and Cream yarn. I don't know if I have that. I do have a comparable loops and thread cotton yarn, so that's equivalent. If you had a Lily Sugar and Cream yarn, if you like this particular color, it's an ombre. It's a shaded denim is the name of the color. You need one ball of at least 95 yards. This one, 95 yards. This would be exactly the amount you need to make this project here. It tells you to use a USH 8 or 5mm hook, or size needed to obtain the proper gauge. Again, please refer back to my last video, or recent video I should say, about gauge to know what that's referring to. And here basically tells you the main piece, so probably the bottom piece here that touches the floor. You're chaining 37, tells you step by step. You're basically, you've got 2 rows and you're working a repeat. So that's it. It's very, very easy. It tells you how to make the sides of it. It tells you how to join them together. Any kind of notes. For me, I actually measured mine because, again, if you had watched my video on gauge, you know I don't. So for me, it's better for me to just take a measurement of my actual Swiffer, and so I know where I need to be. So yeah, I would say start there. Do very basic, very easy. Again, only start getting into patterns, I would suggest, once you've got your tension nailed down, and that you know a single crochet stitch. It usually tells you in the pattern if there's multiple stitches required. This one, you're just lucky, you're just using a single crochet for the whole thing. So if you can do that and your tension is good, there is no reason why you can't make that. Here's a bit more of a advanced, even though it says skill level easy. I don't know, if I were brand new to crocheting and I had just got my tension down, I don't know that I would necessarily say this is going to be easy. I only attempted this because I had been following Mikey from the Crochet Crowd on YouTube, and he actually had a video for this specific pattern, and he walked you through the entire project from beginning to end. And so I thought, you know what, if I get stuck reading this, it doesn't make sense, or I can't figure out what it's talking about, I'm going to at least have a visual video to refer to. And that was a lifesaver. This pattern, again, from your inspirations, it tells you this is actually size specific. So gauge, very important here. Do you think I actually gauged? No, I didn't gauge. It tells you most patterns, if they have sizing like this, so I'll get that closer, hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, so you've got your extra small, your medium, your large, extra large, and 2 and 3X. So your patterns, if they're got sizing like this in multiple sizes, it's usually always written with the smallest size, and the color coding really helps, because for my husband, I made him a large. I went through the pattern, circled all the large areas, so I knew at a quick glance what my sizing or chains or stitch count should be. So I would suggest you do that if you find that helpful. It tells you the color, so if you really like this color, it's a Red Heart Super Saver in a medium time that they used here. It gives you the size of the ball of yarn, and it gives you an idea. So if you're making a large, like I made a large for my husband, I need at least 7 balls of like 364 yards. I don't think I actually used Red Heart Super Saver. I think I made this as an ugly Christmas sweater at his request. I actually made 2. I made one for his uncle because his uncle liked it so much he wanted one. So I made them both an ugly Christmas sweater. I tweaked this pattern to, maybe I'll share the picture, we'll see. Anyway, so it gives you the hook size. You actually need 2 different hook sizes. You're doing the cuffs and waistband and collar in one, and you're doing the arms and the body and the back in another. So you need a 5.5 or a 6. Again, gauge. I didn't gauge. I just used the hook sizes. It gives you all the abbreviations. So approximately beginning, chains, double crochet back post. We covered this in the last video. Double crochet front post. Covered that in the last video. You need a half double crochet, 2 together. I wouldn't say that's a skill absolute beginners will know how to do. So again, that's why I had to watch the video from Mikey from the Crochet Crowd, because I was able to see how that's done. Pattern, repeat, rounds, right side means, like if you're wearing like a wearable shirts, for example, sweaters, your right side is always the outward facing. So if you think, okay, well, you've turned your shirt inside out, the inside out part would be the wrong side. That's the part that's like actually touching your body or closest to your body, where the right side of something is something that will be, it's meant to be the front facing. So if there's like a pattern or a design, that's going to be your right side, as opposed to the actual right and left. It's a right side facing showing versus the wrong side towards your body side. Slip stitch, spaces, stitches, wrong side, we just covered that, and yarn over hook. So there's a lot going on with this pattern. You've got 2 sleeves to make, hopefully of the right length. You've got a front and back. You've got ribbing on the cuff, ribbing at the waist, a little ribbing around the collar. So had it not been for the fact that I had a video tutorial to refer to, I don't know how well this would have turned out, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not sure I would have attempted it, but they actually turned out pretty decent. And it looks like we are back at the beginning. So I believe, let's see, I do want to say when you are starting off to crochet, it really is quite common for us to just make what we call like little swatches. So I made these the other day talking about gauge. You may recognize them. These are also called swatches. It's basically just a test piece. It's just a small piece. It's just, 20 chains going across by however many rows it takes to get to about 4 inches. And what this does, it helps to know that your tension is consistent. As beginners, our tension is not consistent. It's either really loose, it could be really tight. You may not know where you're working your next stitch into. You don't always know that there is a front loop, a back loop, both loops, and in some cases there's a back bump to work into. So we're either going in through both. We might put the next stitch into just the back. We might put the next stitch into just the front. We may somehow manage to turn our work and stick a stitch in the back side. So once you've got that identified, you know how to recognize your stitching. You know about front loop, back loop, both loops. There's a back bump, and there's even, again, like we were talking about earlier, there's posts for double crochet. Once you have a handle on that and your tension, you can see that your tension is consistent, it's not wonky, then yeah, keep making these little swatches until you've got that nailed down. Because once you've got your tension nailed down and you know where you're going, you know which is your first stitch in the row, which is your last. Even if you've got to use stitch markers, use whatever it takes for you to recognize where your start and end point is in your rows. Once you've got your tension nailed down, then yeah, absolutely get yourself an easy pattern or a beginner pattern from any of the yarn companies online, and go nuts. But I know, again, just as a beginner, or a former beginner, I guess, in some ways I still feel like a beginner, just take your time. There's a lot of information out there. You've got a lot more accessibility to information and resources than I certainly did, before the age of the internet, because there wasn't YouTube when I tried to learn. It was just, old books that were God knows how old, which had, visuals that really weren't super helpful at all. But yeah, thank God for YouTube, man. Seriously, a lot of great information out there, whether you get it from me, whether what you find that I say doesn't make sense to you, maybe another, YouTuber who creates content for crochet videos, maybe you'll find them super helpful, and that's fine too, if that makes sense for you. But yeah, it's just giving you guys encouragement and inspiration to keep going. If you have any questions about anything you see here or anything that I've mentioned, feel free to comment. I welcome your questions. I welcome your suggestions to topics for future videos. Again, I do have a live class locally in town in Kempville at the North Grenville Historical Society. That's going to be on Saturday, August 10th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And we're going to make a headband. Let me just, this will be, we're covering the double crochet stitch, making a headband. So we'll be doing that. That's going to be fun for you guys. And as with all of my live events, I usually offer a new mini skein and a 5mm hook to all new crocheters. That way, at least you've got nothing to lose by showing up. You either find it interesting and it makes sense to you, and you don't have to pay for materials and supplies. You get to go home with the yarn and the hook, so you can kind of continue practicing at home. If you want to come to the next event, great, just bring your hook. I usually have information about how much yarn you might need for the next event. So yeah, that's something to look forward to. I hope you guys will come join me this Saturday. It'd be great to see you. And until then, I will hope to catch you guys at the next video. Thank you so much.